All right, so today we're going to talk about the King James Bible, but probably not in the way you're used to. We're going to look past the thees and thous and dig into a really fascinating claim that in some pretty important ways, this 400-year-old text might actually be, well, clearer than modern translations. You know, when most of us think of the King James Version, the KJV, words like beautiful, poetic, majestic, they all come to mind. But, there's always that other word that comes up: difficult. It's often seen as this linguistic relic, right? Just filled with archaic words that make it a real chore for a modern audience to get through. But what if that's not the whole story? What if, in certain key places, the 400-year-old King James text is actually more straightforward than the newest Bibles on the shelf? And yeah, that is the exact kind of surprising claim we're exploring today. The whole argument is that, sure, the KJV has its challenges, but so do modern versions. And sometimes, just sometimes, the KJV is the one that's actually easier to understand right off the bat. Okay, just look at this. This slide pretty much frames the whole argument in just a handful of words. On the left, from the KJV, you've got a name we all recognize: the Red Sea. Simple. On the right, from a modern translation of the exact same verse, you get Wahab and Sufa. One is instantly understood. The other sends you scrambling for the footnotes. Let's see how this plays out in the full verses. All right, so enough theory. Let's actually see this in action. We're going to put some key verses side by side, comparing the KJV with popular modern versions like the ESV and the NIV. Let's start with that verse we just teased. It's from the book of Numbers, and it's referring to an old historical record they called the Book of the Wars of the Lord. And boom, right there you see the point perfectly. The KJV translators, they made a choice. They decided to translate the Hebrew place name into a location people would recognize: the Red Sea. But modern translators, aiming for this scholarly precision, they chose to just transliterate the original Hebrew, and that leaves us with Wahab in Sufa or Zahab in Sufa. For the average person just reading, the KJV is, without a doubt, immediately clearer. And this isn't just a one-off thing either. The pattern keeps popping up. Let's check out another example, this time from the book of Judges, describing the hero Gideon coming back from a battle. So once again, you've got two totally different approaches. The KJV gives us a simple descriptive time marker: before the sun was up. You can picture that, right? It's clear. The ESV and NIV, though, they translate a specific place name: the ascent or the pass of Huris. Now, that's probably more precise if you're an ancient map maker, but unless you are, before the sun was up is just plain easier to understand. Okay, so this isn't just about tricky place names. The analysis we're looking at points out a really consistent pattern when it comes to translating words about, well, the afterlife. Check this out. The KJV, it consistently uses the English word hell. It's a word we all know, for better or worse. Modern versions, though, often leave the original Hebrew word Sheol or the Greek word Hades right there in the text. Now, that might be more specific to the original language, but it absolutely requires the reader to already know what those ancient terms mean. And that's the key, isn't it? To really get these modern translations, you might need a definition just like this one. You need outside knowledge. The very same thing that KJV gets criticized for, needing a dictionary for a word like firmament, turns out to be true for newer Bibles too. All right, let's look at just a few final rapid-fire examples that show how wide-ranging this is. It touches on everything from food to animals. So get this. In the book of Job, the KJV asks if there's any taste in the white of an egg, something we all get. Modern versions, though, reference the juice of the mallow, which is a plant most of us have never even heard of. In another spot in Job, the KJV asks a big philosophical question about wisdom in our inward parts, while the NIV asks who gives wisdom to the ibis, a specific bird. And in Leviticus, the familiar beetle becomes the more specific, but maybe less commonly known, katydid. So the source basically argues that it's a bit unfair to just slap the label outdated on the KJV and call it a day. They point to its incredible history, the insane level of scholarship of its translators, and its consistent theological choices. The argument is that these things deserve some serious consideration, not just a quick dismissal. And this really brings us to the final and maybe most important point. The source uses this verse from the KJV itself to argue that no matter which translation you choose, just passively reading it isn't going to cut it. The Bible itself commands us to study. So whether it's an old-timey word in the KJV or a transliterated Hebrew name in the NIV, getting the full picture means we have to do a little work and maybe pick up a dictionary.